Hello, my dear family. A very warm welcome to each and every one of you. I'm your storyteller, James, and today I need your support more than ever. I'm not feeling too well, been battling a fever since last night, but I'm pushing through because I couldn't let you all down. I ask for your prayers today that I may recover quickly and continue bringing you the stories you love. Before we dive into today's beautiful story, I want to take a moment to deeply pray for all of you. May you all be blessed with health, happiness, peace, and success in every corner of your life. May your days be filled with joy, and may you always find love and light wherever you go. Now, I humbly request that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I ask that you don't skip this story because I've put my heart and soul into it. I'm working tirelessly for you, and all I need is your love and support. You are not just viewers or subscribers to me. You are my loyal family, my greatest strength. I know you'll stand by me, just as I stand by you, bringing you stories that speak from the heart. So without further delay, I'm about to begin this beautiful journey. I hope you enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed creating it for you. Thank you for being here, and let's begin. In the heart of the city's most luxurious restaurant, where polished silverware gleamed under crystal chandeliers and soft instrumental music hummed like a lullaby for the elite, Georgia moved with a rhythm that was her own. She was unapologetically elegant, gracefully composed, lit with a quiet confidence that made her presence magnetic. Georgia wasn't just a waitress in the typical sense. She was the kind of woman who, even in a sleek black and white uniform, exuded a beauty so raw and striking that people did double takes. Her braided hair was tied with a single red ribbon, matching her vivid lipstick, a bold, sultry signature. Her deep brown skin glowed with natural sheen. Her cheeks were kissed by a warmth no makeup could mimic, and her wide, expressive eyes carried a soulful calm that hinted she'd seen more life than she let on. As she walked table to table, her poise turned the background noise into silence. People turned not just because of her looks, but because she wore her strength like armor. There was poetry in her precision, the tilt of a glass, the way she leaned in to explain a menu. Never familiar, yet always making every guest feel seen. But this evening would not be like the rest. Not that Georgia knew, not yet. Outside, a convoy of black cars pulled to the curb, and for a moment, the night held its breath. The doors opened. Out stepped the man whose very name stirred fear and fascination in boardrooms, Sean Tate, the region's most feared CEO. A ruthless empire builder with a heart colder than winter, tall with a chiseled jawline and eyes that seemed carved from ice, he entered with a presence that swallowed the room whole. Assistants flanked him. His phone buzzed nonstop in his hand. He didn't glance. He consumed. The moment he walked in, the staff straightened like puppets on a string. Whispers followed his path. Servers stiffened. Hosts grinned wider. But Georgia, humming softly with a pitcher in hand, rounded a corner, oblivious to the electricity she was about to walk into. Her eyes, casually scanning, locked with his, and the chill in Sean's armor cracked. It wasn't dramatic. No music stopped, but the air shifted, a gaze that asked and answered all at once. He had seen beautiful women before, but Georgia didn't shimmer like jewels. She burned like a star, sure of her own fire. Her smile curled softly. Not to impress, but because she had nothing to prove. Not even to a man who owned skylines. She didn't flinch, didn't rush. She simply looked. And for the first time in years, the untouchable man felt touched. Georgia walked past. A hint of jasmine and vanilla lingered where she had been. Sean's scowl faded. His voice softened. He stared at his untouched wine. He wasn't sure what had just happened, only that it did. She was unlike anything he'd encountered. In a world of control, contracts, and clean lines, Georgia was a question without an answer, and it bothered him, stirred something dormant, buried beneath steel. And as the night moved on around him, conversations fading into static, Sean sat still. Because a woman in a ribbon, with eyes full of quiet oceans, had looked at him and hadn't blinked. The days after blurred into patterns he didn't recognize. A man who thrived on schedules and sterile routine found himself drawn back to one place, that restaurant. At first, he called it coincidence, a convenient location, meetings with investors, casual dinners. But buried under every excuse was a truth he never voiced. He came for her, Georgia, the waitress with the red lips and maddening poise. Her name, learned from the pin on her uniform, echoed like a secret. He told himself it was temporary, a curiosity. But when he found himself straightening his tie more carefully or hoping she'd be on shift, he knew better. It was a ritual now. Georgia noticed. Of course she did. A woman like her, attuned to the unspoken language of power and presence, sensed when eyes lingered too long. Sean Tate, the unreadable, the impenetrable, was starting to slip. His gaze sought her the second he stepped in. His presence felt tethered to her steps, but Georgia remained composed, graceful, cordial but distant. No brighter smile for him, no softness in tone. She knew men like him, polished, powerful, used to getting what they wanted. But his eyes didn't devour. They lingered, they questioned, they wondered. And it unsettled her because it didn't feel like desire. It felt like longing, hesitant, gentle. Each night she expected change, for him to move on. But he didn't. He kept coming back, and that chipped away at her walls, though she didn't let them fall. Still, something stirred in her. Her eyes flicked to the door at the sound of heavy footsteps. Her heart leapt, traitorous and uninvited. She told herself she was being professional, just cautious. But his gaze didn't demand. It waited, watched, almost reverent, and that made the walls harder to hold up. Sean, for all his wealth and power, saw those walls and respected them. He noticed the distance she kept, the evenness of her voice, and strangely, it only deepened his fascination, because Georgia, unlike the world, was unmoved by his reputation. She didn't see the CEO, she saw the man, and that made him feel seen in a way he couldn't understand. He didn't know what to call it, but he knew this: he couldn't stay away. As if they held the map to something he had spent years pretending he didn't need, a way home. Georgia cleared her throat first, softly, her fingers playing with the rim of her glass. "You don't usually ask," she said, her voice low but steady. "You tell." Sean's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "I don't usually feel this out of my depth." She tilted her head, curious despite herself. "And what is it about me that disarms the great Sean Tate?" He looked down at his hands for a moment, then back up, steady now, searching. "You didn't want anything from me." His voice was a little hoarse. "Not power, not status. You looked at me like I was just a man, not a commodity." Her breath hitched slightly at that, because it was true. Because despite the armor she'd built, she had seen him, and that terrified her more than anything. "You kissed me," she said finally, not accusatory, not soft, just the truth between them like a fragile thread. "I did," he admitted, "because I couldn't not. And now? Now I can't stop thinking about it," he said simply, like it was the only answer he had. Silence bloomed again, wide, honest, trembling. Outside the window, the world moved on. Inside, time stood still. Georgia looked away, blinking hard. "I don't belong in your world." He leaned in. "Maybe I don't want that world anymore if you're not in it." A beat, a heartbeat. And then she laughed, quiet and sudden and full of disbelief. "You're insane." "Probably." He smiled now, full and crooked, and something she hadn't seen in him before. "But I'm also right here." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even a plea. It was an offering. 1 hour turned into 2, into stories, into confessions, into laughter that loosened something locked tight in both of them. And when they walked out into the quiet night, shoulder to shoulder, the air between them was changed. Not yet love, not yet something safe, but something real. Would you like the next scene to explore their first true date, or the complications that arise when their two worlds inevitably collide again? Be seen, not as a leader, not as a powerhouse, but simply as a man trying to unlearn solitude. And Georgia, for all her careful walls and guarded glances, felt that unraveling thread inside her, tugging harder each day. She wasn't naive. She had known love before, but this was not the kind of love that swept you off your feet in a storm of promises. This was the kind that walked with you, hand in hand, through the quiet moments, the hesitant ones, the broken ones. The kind that felt more like becoming than falling. The shift between them was as delicate as it was undeniable. No grand declarations, no demands, just slow, consistent presence. The text messages in the middle of the day that weren't about deadlines but about how her coffee probably needed more cinnamon. The way he memorized the way she said, when she was deep in thought and teased her gently just to hear it again. The fact that he started carrying 2 umbrellas. Georgia wasn't used to being the center of someone's intention, especially not someone like Sean. But the way he looked at her now wasn't with the hunger of a man used to getting what he wanted. It was with the awe of a man who had discovered something sacred and was afraid to break it. The world outside spun on, boardrooms and deadlines, crowded subways and quiet elevators. But in their small, shared spaces, a world was unfolding where vulnerability was not a weakness, but a gift. Where his sighs were soft truths and her laughter was a kind of prayer. Where they touched not out of need, but out of reverence. One evening, as autumn crept into the city with its gold-tipped leaves and early dusks, they sat on her balcony, wrapped in the same silence that had once defined their tension, now transformed into peace. He reached for her hand, not like a man staking a claim, but like someone grounding himself in a truth he was still learning how to believe. "I used to think love was a distraction," Sean said, his voice low, as if speaking it too loudly would break the spell. "Something that pulled you away from who you're meant to be. But now," he trailed off, turning to face her, his eyes gentler than she'd ever seen. "Now I think maybe love is the only thing that shows you who you really are." Georgia didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. She just leaned in, resting her head against his shoulder, and let the quiet answer for her. Because in that moment, it was enough. In that moment, they both knew. They were no longer running, no longer hiding. There had always been a flicker of something behind those icy eyes, a shadow of pain, a buried truth. But tonight, something was different. They had been sitting together on the couch, just the two of them, when Georgia noticed it. The tension that coiled around him like a vice, the tight clench of his jaw, the twitch of his fingers. It was as if something inside him was pressing down, demanding to be said, but he couldn't find the words. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. It was cool to the touch, his skin like the surface of still water, hiding a quiet storm beneath. "Sean, what's wrong?" she asked gently, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her then, really looked at her, his gaze sharp, conflicted, torn between speaking and staying silent. It was the first time she had ever seen him like that, vulnerable, unsure. He inhaled deeply. For a moment she thought he might pull away, retreat behind the walls he had lived behind for so long. But he didn't. He stayed. And then, his voice low and trembling, he spoke. He told her about his past, about a woman he had once loved deeply, a woman who had broken him completely. She had been everything he thought he wanted, beautiful, charming, magnetic. Their relationship had seemed perfect to the outside world, but beneath the surface it had been something much darker. He spoke of manipulation, of betrayal. The way she had used him made him believe her love was real, when all she wanted was his power, his fortune, his status. Once she had it all, she discarded him with a coldness that mirrored the very armor he had worn for years, leaving him shattered, a man picking up the remnants of a heart that once believed in love. As he spoke, Georgia's heart ached. Every word cut into her like glass. She could feel his pain as if it were her own. The floodgates had opened, years of buried grief, loneliness, devastation pouring out of him, raw and unfiltered. And with it, something stirred inside her too. A deep sorrow for what he had endured, and something fiercer, a quiet, determined protectiveness. She wanted to shield him from ever feeling that kind of pain again. When his voice finally faltered, when the room fell into a heavy silence, he dropped his gaze to the floor. his fingers still gripping hers like he was holding on for dear life. She saw it clearly then, the deep, invisible wound he had been carrying. The coldness that once seemed like indifference was really a scar, proof of how deeply he had once trusted, how deeply he had once loved. Georgia leaned in, close, her heart swelled with compassion. With her free hand, she gently cupped his cheek and guided his face toward hers. "I'm not her, Sean," she whispered. Simple words, but they held the weight of something immeasurable. She wasn't trying to erase the past or offer empty promises, only to remind him that she was different, that she saw him, that she cared. His eyes flickered with something raw, fragile. Then slowly she kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of passion. It was deeper than that. It was understanding, comfort, truth. She kissed him without pushing, without demanding, just offering herself, her sincerity, her presence. A kiss of healing, a kiss that told him he wasn't alone anymore, that he didn't have to carry the burden of his past by himself. And when the kiss ended, he pulled her into his arms, clutching her tightly, as if afraid that if he let go, everything would disappear. Then to her surprise, he began to cry. The sound, ragged and heartbreaking, cut through her like a blade. But she didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She just held him tighter, her hands moving in gentle circles across his back, grounding him, anchoring him in a moment of safety he hadn't known in years. He cried for the pain, the betrayal, the trust lost long ago. And Georgia let him. She didn't try to fix him, didn't fill the silence with words. She simply let him be, let him feel, let him break. And when the storm of his grief began to quiet, when he finally looked up, red-eyed and trembling, he whispered something that pierced her heart. "Thank you for not judging me, for staying." She smiled softly, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "I'm not going anywhere, Sean. Not now. Not ever." In that moment, they were no longer just two people with painful pasts. They were a team, a unit, facing a future, together. But nothing could have prepared Georgia for how the world would react when their love became public. It began with a few photographers lurking outside the restaurant where she worked, but within days it exploded. Tabloids feasted on their story like vultures. Headlines screamed, "CEO in love with waitress," with a mix of ridicule and mockery, painting their relationship as a joke, something scandalous. Everywhere she turned, there they were, her face and his, plastered on magazine covers, gossip sites, news blurbs. People stared, whispered, laughed. At first, Georgia wanted to disappear. She shrank under the weight of public scrutiny, afraid of what they were saying behind her back. Was she good enough? Why her? The doubts crept in like shadows. But then, there was Sean, unapologetic, unshaken. Where she wanted to retreat, he stepped forward. This wasn't a boardroom battle. This was about love. And love, he had come to learn, was worth fighting for. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, swarmed by paparazzi, Georgia was about to crumble. Her pulse raced with every camera flash, every whispered jab. But then Sean stopped. "Let them talk," he said, his voice firm, eyes locked with hers. "Let them laugh. You and I, we know the truth. That's all that matters." And then, in a bold, defiant move, he took her hand, raised it, held it out for the world to see. She felt the shift in her bones. He wasn't hiding her. He wasn't ashamed. He was choosing her, openly, fearlessly. "You're the only truth I've ever known," he whispered. And with those words, she knew. They were unshakable. The world could talk, could laugh, could judge. But Georgia didn't care anymore. With Sean by her side, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Strength. Together, they would weather whatever came next, hand in hand. Their love louder than the noise, stronger than the storm. Sometimes, in the quiet comfort of their evenings, Sean would read aloud to Georgia, passages from books that had shaped him, calmed him, and stayed with him over the years. Other times, they simply sat close, their bodies touching lightly, exchanging whispered dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. With Georgia, Sean discovered that love wasn't made in grand gestures, but in the gentle rhythm of everyday moments. It wasn't the lavish dates, designer gifts, or dramatic declarations that made him feel like the luckiest man alive. It was the way she curled beside him on the couch, the way she rested her head on his shoulder, trusting him completely to hold her, protect her, be hers. When they talked, it was never about business or wealth or the weight of his title. It was about them, about how two seemingly different lives had found a home in each other. It felt destined, like they'd been meant to meet all along. He never considered himself a romantic. His life had been too focused on success, too tightly gripped by ambition. But with Georgia, he learned love didn't need fireworks to be felt. It was in her touch, fingertips tracing his skin as if memorizing every inch. It was in the way she looked at him, not as a CEO, not as a man with power, but as someone real, bruised, healing, trying. She believed in him, in them. She saw love not as perfection, but as something messy, raw, and real, and still beautiful. Sean hadn't expected to find this kind of connection, but now that he had, he couldn't imagine life without it. She didn't call him sir or mister, whatever, or anything distant. She called him Shaw, just Shaw, intimate, honest, like he was hers and hers alone. She didn't see the title. She saw the man. They weren't perfect, but they were perfect for each other, a beautiful match of brokenness and healing, of passion and tenderness. Love, he realized, wasn't about waiting for the right moment. It was about choosing each other, day by day, through the imperfections. And then came the night. The rooftop was quiet, wrapped in a surreal calm, the sky stretching infinitely above them, like the universe itself had paused to bear witness. Sean, the man who always controlled every detail, felt utterly unprepared, yet completely sure. Georgia stood beside him, grounding him, making the impossible seem possible. Her gaze was lost in the stars, her expression serene, but he saw the subtle tremble in her hands, the weight of the moment mirrored in her eyes. He had never believed in fairy tales, not after betrayal, loss, and a heart that had been shattered one too many times. But Georgia had changed all that. She swept into his life like a force of nature, unexpected, undeniable, and taught him to feel again, to hope again. Love, he realized, wasn't something to be tamed. It was something to surrender to. He turned to her. His heart thundered. Then slowly he sank to one knee. The motion was simple, but it carried everything. Georgia, he said, her name trembling in the air between them. Her eyes widened. He saw it then, that flicker of surprise, the flood of emotion, and the knowing. She had known, maybe even before he did. You changed me, he whispered, voice catching. You made me feel again. You made me believe again. You made me live. And I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me. Then the question, will you marry me? The silence that followed wasn't full of fear. It was sacred, weightless, glowing with anticipation. Then softly she spoke. Yes, she said, and then again, stronger. 1,000 times, yes. Time folded inward, the stars above blurred. Sean surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, the ring still clutched in his fist. He kissed her as if the world were ending, as if this moment was everything. And it was. The kiss wasn't just passion, it was a promise, a beginning, a forever. When they broke apart, gasping, their foreheads touched. You're mine, he murmured, and I'm yours. Forever, she whispered back, her hands on his face, eyes shining with tears and joy. They had found something rare, something real. The morning of their wedding arrived like something out of a dream. The private garden was a sanctuary of roses, jasmine, and peonies, fragrant and glowing beneath a golden sun. It was here, surrounded by the quiet love of those who mattered most, that they would say their vows. Under a wrought iron arch laced with vines, Sean waited. The tuxedo felt too formal for the raw emotion inside him, but it was right. It marked the gravity of what he was about to do. He never thought he'd be here. He never thought he'd want to be here. But Georgia had shifted his entire world. And then, the music swelled. The doors opened, and there she was. Georgia walked toward him like something out of a vision. Graceful, radiant, a goddess in shimmering white. Her dress hugged her just enough. Her braids framed her face like royalty, and her lips, painted the same red as the night they first met, were curved in a trembling smile. But it wasn't her beauty that undid him. It was her eyes. They radiated love, pure, unshakable. When she reached him, he took her hand, and the last of his nerves faded. The ceremony was simple. No excess, no theatrics, just two people, deeply in love, ready to become one. He looked into her eyes and spoke the words that said everything. I see you. I choose you forever. Everything they had built led to this. Lips meeting in a kiss that sealed not just love, but destiny. In that one tender moment, they both knew. This was forever. No matter what came next, they would face it hand in hand. Soulmates, bound by a love so pure, so real that nothing could ever break it. That kiss wasn't just affection. It was a vow. Two hearts united. Marriage for Sean and Georgia wasn't a finish line, but the beginning of something deeper. It wasn't about rings or ceremonies. It was about building a life, layer by layer, day by day, filled with joy, love, and even the occasional storm. They learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about perseverance, about laughing through the hard days and lifting each other higher on the good ones. Every morning they woke wrapped in each other's arms, a tangle of limbs and warmth that felt like home. Their passion had evolved into something richer, something sacred. An unspoken understanding lived in the space between their glances, their touches, their silence. Even when the world felt overwhelming, they found their calm in each other. Sean became her anchor. Georgia, his wings. In the hush of early morning light filtering through the blinds, Sean would always wake first, just to watch her sleep. Her hair fanned against the pillow, her lips curved in peace. After all these years, she still made his heart skip. And when her eyes opened and met his, no words were needed. The love between them was quiet, constant, and profound. Georgia's dream of owning an art cafe had blossomed into reality, and Sean had supported her every step of the way. Not just with money, but with presence. From painting walls to standing by her on opening night, he never wavered. And every morning, he stopped by. Sometimes for coffee, always for her. His quiet belief in her gave her strength. The cafe, a cozy corner tucked into the city's rhythm, reflected them both. Her paintings adorned the walls, filling the space with color and soul. It wasn't just a business, it was a sanctuary, a dream made real through love and persistence. And with Sean by her side, she had learned that with the right person, anything was possible. Their nights together were filled with laughter, tangled sheets, whispered confessions, and moments that deepened their bond. Passion hadn't faded, it had grown deeper. Some nights they simply lay together. No words spoken, hearts beating in rhythm. On those nights, Sean would whisper, "You're my miracle." And she'd blush, humbled by the depth of his love, yet always knowing it was true. To him, she was everything. The woman who shattered his walls, who made him believe in something greater. To Georgia, he was more than a husband. He was the one who saw her, truly saw her. Her doubts melted in his presence, and with him she believed she could fly. Their life wasn't perfect. They bickered over shoes left in the hallway or missed dinners due to late work hours, but every disagreement led them back to each other. Love, they learned, wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the willingness to fight through it together. They healed together, too. Sean carried scars of betrayal, of loss, and when the shadows of the past crept in, Georgia was his light. And she, too, had her moments of doubt, of feeling unworthy. But he never let her forget who she was, the woman who had changed his world. With every trial, their love grew. It transformed from fire to foundation, from sparks to steady flame. They shared inside jokes, comfortable silences, and an intimacy that needed no performance. Georgia's art cafe continued to thrive, a haven of inspiration and belonging. And behind every successful step was Sean, her silent partner, her strongest believer. He watched her flourish, proud and in awe. Her joy was his. Their love became something eternal. Through the years, their bond matured into a deep companionship. Partners, best friends, soulmates. Years later, they found themselves back at the same restaurant where it all began, sitting side by side, hands intertwined. The world had changed, but the feeling between them remained. Familiar, sacred. Georgia glowed, her confidence radiant, her laughter music to his ears. As Sean kissed her knuckles gently, emotion shimmered in the air between them. "Remember the kiss that ruined me?" he teased, his voice laced with nostalgia. She smiled knowingly, her fingers tightening around his. "No," she replied softly, "the kiss that saved you." It hadn't just changed him, it had saved them both. From loneliness, from fear, from never knowing what it was like to be truly loved. That kiss had been their turning point. Sean leaned in again, brushing his lips against hers. Slow, deep, intentional. It was the same kiss they'd shared years ago, but now it carried the weight of everything they had built. The struggles, the triumphs, the quiet mornings, and the late-night talks. It was a kiss rooted in every shared moment. Two people once from different worlds, a waitress and a CEO, now one story, one life, one love. They broke apart, laughter bubbling between them. It wasn't just joy, it was contentment, a peace that came from knowing they had weathered life together. Their love wasn't flashy or loud. It was in the glances, in the quiet presence, in the way their hands fit perfectly together. It had started with a kiss, but it had grown into a lifetime. As the noise of the restaurant faded, as time slowed for just a breath, Sean pressed his forehead to hers and whispered, "You are my forever. I never knew what true love was until I found you." Georgia's heart swelled. She held him tighter, her voice soft and full of truth. "And I never knew I could be so loved." Together they sat there, two souls who had found home in each other.